seen in a window. They say that certain places possess a dark soul, an animus forged in the furnace of emotion through the heat of vile deeds. Sinister forces are drawn to such places, such scenes of pain and torture, of murder and human sacrifice. Some say the violent destruction of a soul can rip open a portal to the dimensions beyond, through which malign entities might gain access to our own mundane world. Just so you know, it's all true. Such places might seem innocuous enough to the uninitiated, but those who know what to look for can often single them out.
Yeah, BMXs are cool, but when I'm 16, I'm getting a ninja,
Paul declared confidently, freewheeling his bike along the pavement, the rear hub ticking frenetically, his weight supported casually on one pedal.
Nah, you ain't getting a ninja, Paul,
retorted Baz, chewing thoughtfully. The Hubba Bubba had lost its flavour an hour before.
What's a ninja again?
Baz asked.
It's a motorbike,
said Paul wearily.
A Kawasaki 900cc. It's the fastest motorbike in the world,
he asserted, uncertain of the validity of his claim, but confident the others lacked the knowledge to contradict him.
You are not getting a big motorbike when you're 16 years old, Paul Cram.
Sally insisted.
You're not allowed to get a big one until you're 18. My brother's got a Honda,
she concluded, confirming her authority on the matter. Sally drew her bike to a halt at the curb, the front brake squealing, battered Converse scuffing across the loose gravel. The boys stopped beside her.
What's the matter?
demanded Paul.
Kane Parker,
she whispered, indicating the direction with a lift of her little chin. Across the deserted square, 3 boys had emerged from behind the tattooed garage block and were strolling nonchalantly towards them.
Paul Cram,
Kane shouted. His voice was coarse and deep for his 12 years, and he spat the boy's name with theatrical contempt.
Wait there, I want a word with you, boy.
Paul and Baz exchanged nervous glances, stalled and uncertain what to do. Whatever they did now, it meant trouble. You didn't defy Kane Parker without facing the consequences. But meekly waiting for him would only result in some fresh hell of humiliation, or worse.
come on.
Said Sally firmly.
We're not waiting for that idiots to bully us. We've got bikes. They're on foot. We can get away.
She hefted the front of her bike around, sidestepping awkwardly before peddling off across the empty street. Paul and Baz exchanged another fretful glance. Then, half reluctantly, they followed her, as behind them, Kane and his boys broke into a run.
Oi! I said wait there, you little shit!
Yelled Kane, scowling. But Paul was already pedalling away, not looking back, pretending he hadn't heard, with Baz riding close on his back wheel. Sally led the way, freewheeling around the corner onto Denzil Street, then whipping down one of the back lanes, and across that patch of waste ground where they'd built that scrapwood den last summer. The one that had been wantonly ransacked the following weekend by Kane and his gang.
We lost them,
grinned Baz, drawing his rally burner to a halt with a skid.
Yeah, but they'll be after us. We have to be careful,
mused Sally.
Here, this way,
said Paul, holding aside a damaged section of the high fence that ran along the lane.
We're not really supposed to go in there,
said Sally doubtfully.
It's fenced off for a reason, you know.
So what?
Said Baz.
I've been in there loads of times.
Sally hesitated.
Come on,
smiled Paul encouragingly.
They'll never find us in here.
She glanced back along the lane dubiously, then, sighing her assent, she followed the boys through. Baz dragged the fence panel back into place behind her, leaving no trace of their passing, and the 3 rode off to explore the forbidden district as the September sun gradually descended the corduroy flank of Crestfall Tower. A fierce fire had gutted the block 6 years before. There had been a number of tragic deaths, followed by a police inquiry. It had been suspected that the fire was started deliberately, but the results of the investigation were never brought to light. Since then, the place had been abandoned, fenced off, and condemned by the council, though they'd never quite gotten around to commissioning its demolition. So it remained, blackened and deserted, looming over the sprawling South London estate, like a monolithic gravestone.
Hey, look at that,
said Paul, bemused. He was pointing upward at the silent tower. Sally drew her bike up beside him and followed his gaze. The blank face of the tower stood in clear-cut silhouette against the deep metallic blue of the late afternoon sky. Near its centre, 6 or 7 floors up from the ground, the dull expanse of its neglected facade was interrupted by a solitary illuminated window, whose filthy panes were lit from within by a smudgy pink glow.
That's a bit weird,
reflected Baz, dumping his bike on the weed-grown concrete beside his friends and advancing a few paces.
Look, someone's there,
Sally exclaimed. A figure had appeared, tiny at this distance, cupping their hands against the glass and gazing out for a space, before vanishing into the room out of sight. A moment later, the figure had returned, and was frantically hammering on the glass in apparent distress.
What's the matter with them?
Demanded Baz, looking back at the others incredulously.
They might be trapped,
said Paul flatly.
Come on, we should help.
Running away from Kane and his gang had been the smart thing to do. Paul knew that, but his pride had been stung by what felt like an act of cowardice. Now he saw a chance to redeem himself. Setting his weight against the pedals, he rolled away across the cracked concrete without looking back.
We shouldn't go in there.
Sally called after him. Turning to Baz for support, she added uncertainly,
We should tell the police.
What? Tell them we've been trespassing?
Teased Baz, slowly circling her on his BMX.
Come on, you're not scared, are you, Sal?
Sally frowned.
Yeah, I am a bit.
Don't worry, I'll look after you.
They hid their bikes out of sight, just inside the entrance to the block. Paul led the way, setting off up the stairs, taking the steps 2 at a time, his footsteps echoing vastly in the cavernous stairwell. The 7th floor corridor smelt musty and damp, its walls embroidered with a patchwork of semi-literate graffiti. Sally didn't like it one bit, but it seemed too late to go back now. 20 yards down the littered corridor, a sliver of brightness leaked out beneath the foot of one of the doors, illuminating a dirty strip of tiled floor in a sickly, sallow light. Sally took a deep breath.
What if someone's in there?
She said. Her voice was smaller now, less confident.
There is someone in there. You saw him. That's why we're here.
Baz chided.
Someone bad, I mean.
She rebutted, impatiently.
Like a bloody drug addict or a child molester. What if it's a ghost?
Baz hesitated. He hadn't thought of that.
We can easily outrun some junkie or an old pervert.
Paul hissed.
Do what you want. I'm going to have a look.
He struck out along the corridor, the others following reluctantly, several paces behind. He hesitated at the door, glancing back at the others for support. The two crouched side by side, stock still and eyes wide. He knocked, stepping back anxiously as the door swung ponderously inward at his touch, on silent hinges, bathing the frightened boy in a ghoulish yellow light. With the opening of the door, Paul became suddenly aware of a deep bass drone in the pit of his stomach, and with it came the realization that the sound had been building at the border of his perception since they'd entered the tower block several minutes before.
Hello?
Said Paul weakly, waiting for an answer that never came. He repeated the question, louder this time, more assertive. Hello? Still nothing. The deep bass drone continued unabated as Paul stepped gingerly across the threshold, the others following apprehensively. Inside, the flat was squalid and unkempt. A moth-eaten couch abutted one wall of the cramped lounge, wire springs visible through its threadbare upholstery. The blotchy, damp-stained walls were decorated in a haphazard montage of peeling yellowed newspaper. The windows, too, were similarly pasted over, as if in an effort to block out the daylight, save for in one spot where the makeshift covering had been ripped away, the torn sheets lying crumpled and discarded beneath the sill. This had been the place where the figure had appeared. That much was evident, but where were they now? Paul spoke again, his voice sounding small and fragile against the omnipresent drone.
Hello? Is there anybody here?
Again, he received no answer. Cautiously, and as quietly as he could, he forged deeper into the flat. Adjacent to the lounge, he found its 2 modest bedrooms had been knocked roughly into one, the remains of the dividing wall between the two reduced to so much rubble. that now lay in careless piles around the edges. The resultant space was dominated by 3 immense boxes, arranged at angles, precisely like the spokes of a wheel. Each was carved from a single block of granite, whose intricately carved flanks rose to the ceiling. Paul stood in the doorway, bewildered by this peculiar and oddly unsettling find. The others gathered at his shoulder. Baz spoke first.
What the hell are those things?
Paul shrugged.
I don't like it. Let's just go.
Sally insisted. There was a heavy grating sound, as of stone grinding on stone. And when he looked, Paul perceived that each of the great stone sarcophagi had cracked to reveal a slab-like door that now slid ever so slowly open. A lurid red light flooded the room, painting everything in a rich crimson phosphorescence. The droning bass note intensified, and now it was accompanied by a low, dismal chanting that swelled in depth and volume even as they listened, in growing alarm.
"Oh shit,"
whispered Baz. Behind him, the front door slammed shut with a bang that spun them around in shock. There followed a series of sharp, deliberate clicks as its locks were engaged. Sally screamed. Together, they fled toward the door, finding it, as they'd feared, locked fast. Paul gripped the handle in both hands, wrenching it with all the strength he had, as the choral chanting redoubled. The voices that formed its incomprehensible phrasing were alien and terrible, issued forth from throats not spawned on this earth. There were animalistic screams in it, and the discordant wail of an incalculable host of souls twisted in eternal torment. It drilled into Paul's ears, an inundating symphony of dread, the augur of impending annihilation. It was no good. The door was unyielding, and when he tried again, the handle broke off in his hand, sending him sprawling on the blood-stained carpet. Baz and Sally were at the window now, hammering on the glass with white knuckles, lost in a frenzy of fear. Vexed and helpless, and surrendering to panic, Paul joined them in their futile efforts at the window. Behind them, a black leash of whip-like tentacles emerged, groping blindly but indefatigably from the nearest of the 3 sarcophagi, as that appalling, unearthly chant rose to an ear-splitting crescendo. Outside, it was silent, save for the distant din of London traffic. Kane Parker spat his enmity onto the cracked pavement, kicking a rusty can clattering across the desolate square.
Hey, Kane,
said the taller of his 2 cronies.
there's someone up there, up in the old tower block.
Kane looked up, his dark eyes sharp even in the haze of dusk.
That's poor bloody Cram, I swear. Yeah, it looks like, don't it?
Agreed the other. Kane smiled coldly.
Let's go and get the little bastard.
You have been listening to Scene in a Window, Episode 15 of Savage Bites. The premise for this story was lifted directly from a dream described to me by a close friend of mine, Pete Amachree. He's a really cool artist. You should check out his work on Artstation. I'll leave a link below. As Pete described it, the dream was really vivid and quite cinematic and uncharacteristically linear for a dream. The tower block was there, complete with frantic, stranded figure hammering on the window upstairs and screaming for help. The derelict flat was there, all pasted over with old newspapers. The weird sarcophagi were there, the crazy alien chanting, the next lot of victims waiting outside. All those elements were already there in the dream. I just had to add a few characters and kind of just craft it into a narrative, really, and that was it. It's a gift, really. So, Pete, thanks for that, mate. Much appreciated, and I hope you think I did it justice. And I hope you enjoyed listening to it. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And, please share with any of your friends who are into horror or creepypasta or SCP or anything like that. Anyone who might be interested, really. And thanks again for listening. You have been listening to The Savage Bites podcast at savagebites.net.